The vote to erase Earth lasted exactly 32 seconds. In a chamber so vast that entire cities could have disappeared beneath its vaulted ceiling, the fate of a single world was reduced to a glowing countdown suspended above an ocean of alien delegates. Thousands of species sat in concentric rings stretching into the darkness, their forms impossibly different, some woven from living crystal, others cloaked in flowing clouds of bioluminescent gas, others hidden beneath polished exoskeletons that reflected the cold white light of the galactic Concord. Ancient civilizations that had survived supernovas, empires older than humanity's written history, beings who measured time in millennia instead of years. Every one of them watched the same holographic display as 32 silent seconds slipped away. One by one, columns of emerald light ignited across the chamber. Approve. Approve. Approve, ****. The verdict spread like wildfire through the assembly until the sea of green became almost blinding. Earth would be exiled. Humanity would be cut off from every trade route, every diplomatic channel, every jump gate connecting civilization itself. No appeals. No negotiations. No second vote. Not a single human representative stood inside the chamber. Their seats remained empty. That silence unsettled more delegates than any speech ever could. High Chancellor Vorex slowly rose from his obsidian throne, his elongated silhouette stretching beneath the rotating stars projected across the ceiling. His species had governed the Concord for nearly 8,000 years, and never, not once, had a unanimous vote been questioned. His voice echoed through the colossal hall with ceremonial certainty. The decision is final. The words rippled across the chamber in hundreds of translated frequencies. Earth is hereby designated an isolated world. Effective immediately, all interstellar access is revoked. No vessel shall enter. No vessel shall depart. Humanity's expansion ends today. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every screen in the chamber blinked. Once. Twice. A third time. The galaxy's most secure communication network, protected by quantum encryption that had never been breached, filled with static. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Engineers hurried to their consoles. Security drones activated, their crimson optics sweeping the chamber as invisible countermeasures flooded every network. Someone was attempting to hijack the Concord Central broadcast. Impossible. Every expert in the room knew it. Then the static stopped. The chamber fell into absolute silence. A single image appeared. Not an emblem of surrender. Not a military insignia. Only a view of Earth. Blue oceans shimmered beneath drifting white clouds. Sunlight traced the curve of continents with breathtaking calm. It looked fragile from space, peaceful, almost insignificant against the endless black surrounding it. Then a voice spoke. Steady. Measured. Almost disappointingly calm. You believe you've decided our future. No anger. No desperation. No fear. Just quiet certainty. The words carried through every translator, every speaker, every neural receiver in the chamber, sounding as though the speaker stood beside each delegate personally. You mistake isolation for punishment. A long pause followed. Even the security alarms had fallen silent. Somewhere deep inside the chamber, an ancient delegate who had witnessed the collapse of entire civilizations felt something he had not experienced in over 4,000 years. Unease. The voice continued. You have mistaken restraint for dependence. The image of Earth slowly rotated, revealing thousands of faint lights glimmering across the night side of the planet, not cities, but orbital structures hidden within the darkness, too numerous to count. Then came the final sentence. Quiet enough to whisper. Powerful enough to freeze a galaxy. You believe you've approved our exile. Another pause. Then. Now, you're about to learn the rules humanity has been following all along. Orbiting silently above the brilliant curve of Earth, the UNS Horizon drifted like a continent carved from black steel, its immense hull reflecting the pale glow of the moon. It wasn't merely the largest vessel humanity had ever built, it was a declaration. Kilometer-long antenna arrays stretched into space like cathedral spires, while rotating habitation rings shimmered with thousands of warm lights, revealing that this warship carried not only soldiers, but scientists, diplomats, engineers, and families. It was a city entrusted with humanity's future. Inside its command deck, polished alloy floors mirrored holographic star maps that floated in midair, constantly updating with streams of tactical intelligence from every corner of the solar system. The gentle hum of fusion reactors blended with the rhythmic pulse of life support systems, creating an eerie calm that contrasted sharply with the political storm unfolding beyond Earth's atmosphere. Admiral Evelyn Ward stood alone before the panoramic observation glass, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the blue world slowly rotate beneath her. From this distance, there were no borders. No wars. No governments arguing over ideology. Only oceans reflecting sunlight and clouds drifting peacefully across continents that billions still called home. It looked fragile enough to cradle in two hands. Yet Evelyn knew better than anyone how deceptive appearances could be. Her reflection stared back at her, gray streaks beginning to claim her dark hair, sharp eyes shaped by decades of impossible negotiations, and the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent an entire career trying to convince the galaxy that humanity deserved trust instead of suspicion. She remembered her first diplomatic mission nearly 30 years earlier. Back then, humans had entered the Galactic Concord with hope burning brighter than caution. They believed cooperation could erase fear. They shared medical breakthroughs freely. They opened their universities to alien scholars. They exchanged technologies, resources, and even pieces of their culture without demanding dominance in return. Humanity had wanted partners. Instead, they found patrons. Older civilizations smiled politely while limiting Earth's expansion. Every treaty came with invisible chains. Military production quotas. Restrictions on artificial intelligence research. Limits on deep space colonization. Inspection fleets arriving unannounced under the excuse of maintaining galactic stability. Every compromise had been presented as necessary for peace. Humanity accepted them. Not because they were weak. Because they believed peace deserved patience. Behind Evelyn, the command deck remained unusually quiet. Officers moved with disciplined precision, their voices barely rising above whispers as holographic displays illuminated determined faces. Massive tactical projections hovered above circular consoles, displaying orbital traffic, defense grids, and encrypted communications arriving faster than anyone could read them. No alarm sounded. No one panicked. Preparation had replaced fear long ago. A young communications officer finally stepped forward. "Admiral, confirmation from Lunar Command." Evelyn turned. "Status?" "The Concorde has officially transmitted the Exile order to every member system." The room fell still. Nobody reacted. No curses. No disbelief. Only silent acknowledgement. As though everyone aboard had expected this message for years. Evelyn nodded once. "So." Her voice remained calm. "It begins." Beyond the observation window, thousands of objects suddenly caught the sunlight. Defense satellites. Orbital construction platforms. Supply stations. Civilian habitats. Each one subtly shifted position with flawless coordination, like pieces of a puzzle quietly assembling themselves. Far below, hidden beneath mountain ranges, beneath oceans, beneath deserts untouched for centuries, automated facilities awakened one after another. Massive reactors that had remained dormant for decades surged to life. Shipyards buried beneath the lunar crust illuminated cavernous tunnels large enough to launch fleets directly into space. Asteroid mining colonies ceased commercial operations and redirected every resource toward classified manufacturing complexes. The galaxy believed Earth had spent decades asking permission to survive. It had never noticed that humanity had spent those same decades preparing for the day permission would no longer matter. Evelyn watched the first encrypted readiness reports arrive across the tactical display. Every colony. Every fleet. Every orbital fortress. Every hidden installation. Online. She allowed herself one slow breath before fixing her gaze on the stars beyond the solar system. They thought Exile would leave us alone, she whispered. A faint smile touched her face, not one of arrogance, but of absolute certainty. They never realized. We've been building our future in silence. The announcement of Earth's exile spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, hyperspace relays carried the news to thousands of inhabited systems, igniting confusion, celebration, and fear in equal measure. Stock markets on distant trade worlds collapsed as merchants realized humanity's shipping lanes had vanished overnight. Refugee convoys altered their courses, desperate to avoid the solar system before the Concorde's blockade was fully established. Across military command centers, admirals studied tactical maps with growing unease. They had expected outrage from humanity. Angry broadcasts. Diplomatic protests. Perhaps even scattered resistance. Instead, there was nothing. Earth answered the greatest political humiliation in its history with absolute silence. That silence became the most frightening sound in the galaxy. The Concorde's Grand Expeditionary Fleet advanced toward the solar system in disciplined formation. Tens of thousands of warships emerged from hyperspace beyond Neptune's orbit, their arrival illuminating the darkness like a second constellation. Towering dreadnoughts drifted beside sleek interceptor carriers, while logistics vessels and command platforms stretched across millions of kilometers in a wall of polished metal. Their engines glowed with brilliant blue plasma, scattering icy particles from the Kuiper belt like glittering dust. To the commanders aboard those ships, the operation appeared routine. Secure the borders. Confiscate prohibited technology. Enforce the exile. They believed Earth had already accepted defeat. Then the sensors began reporting anomalies. At first, they were dismissed as interference caused by solar radiation. Minutes later, they multiplied. Unidentified energy signatures detected beneath the lunar surface. Thermal activity increasing inside asteroid clusters. Quantum fluctuations observed near solar orbit 7. Bridge crews exchanged uncertain glances as holographic displays filled with crimson markers. The readings made no sense. Entire regions of empty space were producing power levels comparable to active Starship reactors. Deep within the asteroid belt, objects previously catalogued as lifeless rocks emitted synchronized gravitational pulses before falling silent again. Near the Sun, bursts of electromagnetic distortion danced through the corona in patterns too precise to be natural. Senior analysts searched decades of astronomical records. Nothing matched. Not even close. Aboard the Concorde flagship Judicator Prime, Fleet Marshal Kaler stared at the tactical projection floating above his command table. The old commander had crushed pirate kingdoms, survived civil wars, and watched ancient empires disappear into history. He trusted data more than instinct. Yet instinct refused to stay quiet. "This isn't random," he murmured. His intelligence officer hesitated before answering. "No, Marshal." "What does it look like?" The officer swallowed. "It looks." He struggled to find words. "Like something is waking up." Across the fleet, long-range reconnaissance drones accelerated toward the strange signals. One after another, their camera feeds dissolved into static the moment they approached the moon's far side. Others vanished entirely without transmitting distress calls. No explosions. No debris. They simply ceased to exist. On Earth, no ships launched to intercept them. No weapons fired. Cities remained calm beneath drifting evening clouds. Children walked home from school. Trains crossed illuminated bridges. Fishing boats returned to coastal harbors as waves rolled peacefully beneath orange sunsets. To anyone watching ordinary broadcasts, humanity appeared almost indifferent to the greatest military buildup in galactic history. But appearances had always been humanity's favorite weapon. Deep beneath the Himalayas, reactors older than most nations reached full power for the first time in 70 years. Hidden chambers beneath the Pacific Ocean unlocked kilometer-thick blast doors sealed since the earliest days of spaceflight. Automated factories buried inside extinct volcanoes assembled machines whose existence had never appeared in any government record. Beneath the moon's gray surface, enormous vaults echoed with the thunder of awakening engines as countless dormant systems came alive in perfect synchronization. Every activation followed the same protocol. No speeches. No celebrations. No hesitation. Only preparation. Fleet Marshal Kaler watched another wave of sensor warnings flash across his display. The impossible energy signatures were no longer scattered. They were connecting. Invisible lines stretched across the solar system, linking moons, planets, asteroids, and hidden installations into a single coordinated network. His breathing slowed. For the first time in his centuries of command, victory no longer felt inevitable. He looked toward the tiny blue world hanging at the center of the tactical map. It wasn't fear, he whispered. They were buying time. And somewhere in the endless darkness beyond the fleet, something immense shifted, as though the solar system itself had finally decided to open its eyes. Fleet Marshal Kaler had spent centuries believing that power belonged to those who wrote the laws. Every empire in the Galactic Concord had risen through treaties, regulations, and carefully balanced restrictions that kept younger civilizations dependent on older ones. Humanity had always seemed frustratingly cooperative, too willing to compromise, too eager to negotiate, too patient to be dangerous. Looking back, Kaler realized that had been the greatest deception of all. Earth had never resisted the Concord's endless legal framework because it couldn't. It had accepted every clause because someone, somewhere, had already imagined the day those clauses would become weapons. The revelation arrived without warning. A priority transmission erupted across every military and diplomatic channel in the Concord. It wasn't hacked. It wasn't forced. It carried the highest level of legal authentication recognized by every member civilization. Ancient encryption keys validated it instantly. Government archives confirmed every signature. Every date. Every amendment. The document had always been there. Hidden in plain sight. Analysts rushed to their consoles, scrolling through thousands of pages of interstellar law. Their faces slowly lost all color as forgotten appendices emerged from deep archival records. Sovereign Response Clause. An emergency protocol added during humanity's admission into the Galactic Concord nearly 80 years earlier. Almost no one remembered approving it. Even fewer had ever read it. Buried beneath routine administrative language was a condition so simple that generations of lawmakers had overlooked its true meaning. Should the Galactic Concord revoke humanity's sovereign status or permanently sever Earth from interstellar governance, every technological, military, scientific, and diplomatic limitation imposed upon humanity shall become immediately null and void. Silence consumed command centers across dozens of star systems. Then came the realization. The Concord hadn't merely exiled Earth. It had legally freed it. Every restriction imposed over decades, artificial intelligence limitations, antimatter production quotas, gravitational weapon bans, autonomous fleet regulations, quantum manufacturing controls, deep space fortress prohibitions, ceased to exist at the exact moment the Exile vote became official. Humanity had not violated a single law. The galaxy had dissolved its own chains. Aboard the UNS Horizon, Admiral Evelyn Ward stood before a wall of holographic displays as encrypted confirmations flooded into the command deck. Treaty limitations revoked. Orbital production directive unrestricted. Strategic AI protocols released. Black archive authorization confirmed. One after another, red security icons shifted to brilliant white. Locked systems accepted new commands. Dormant permissions awakened. Entire databases that had remained sealed for generations opened without resistance. Around the bridge, officers exchanged quiet looks, not of surprise, but of recognition. This was the moment they had trained for without ever speaking its name aloud. Far beneath Earth's surface, mountains that had stood unchanged for millions of years began to tremble. Not from earthquakes. From machinery. Entire peaks slowly separated along perfectly engineered seams, revealing colossal launch shafts hidden beneath forests and stone. Elevator platforms larger than cities carried unfinished warships toward open skies, their dark hulls reflecting the first rays of sunrise. Across the Pacific Ocean, the water churned violently as enormous structures rose from impossible depths. Kilometer-long carriers emerged from beneath the sea, shedding waterfalls from armored decks that had never before touched daylight. Along the moon's hidden far side, cavern walls split apart as silent shipyards illuminated endless tunnels filled with vessels no alien satellite had ever detected. The asteroid belt transformed. What had appeared to be scattered rocks rearranged themselves with breathtaking precision. Asteroids unfolded. Armor plates separated. Engine arrays ignited. Entire battle stations emerged from disguises maintained for decades, each one activating in flawless synchronization. Humanity had hidden an industrial civilization inside its own solar system. Not through invisibility. Through patience. Fleet Marshal Kaler watched the impossible unfold across the tactical display as thousands of unknown contacts appeared faster than the system could catalog them. His officers struggled to assign classifications. Shipyards. Defense grids. Autonomous fleets. Gravitational arrays. Manufacturing worlds. Every scan uncovered another layer beneath the last. Every answer produced 10 new questions. He finally understood why humanity had never protested the Concorde's inspections. They had never shown anyone where to look. On the bridge of the horizon, Admiral Ward watched Earth's hidden network come alive like stars appearing across a midnight sky. Decades of silence. Generations of restraint. Entire lifetimes spent building in darkness had led to this single irreversible moment. She spoke softly, almost to herself. They believed exile would make us weaker. Outside the observation window, hundreds of concealed fleets accelerated into formation, their engines illuminating the void with rivers of blue-white fire. Her eyes never left the stars. They never realized. They were the ones who signed our freedom. The first Concorde warships crossed the solar exclusion boundary in perfect formation, their engines carving rivers of blue light through the darkness beyond Neptune. Thousands of vessels advanced with mathematical precision, confident that overwhelming numbers would crush whatever resistance humanity could still assemble. Fleet Marshal Kaler stood at the center of the Judicator Prime's command bridge, watching the tactical display bloom with symbols representing the largest military force the galaxy had gathered in centuries. Every calculation predicted the same outcome. Earth might inflict losses. It might delay the inevitable. But no civilization, especially one facing exile, could survive against the combined strength of the Galactic Concorde. Then the countdown reached zero. Not for humanity, but for the trap they had spent generations preparing. The stars themselves seemed to move. Without warning, space rippled like the surface of a disturbed ocean. Invisible gravitational fields folded across millions of kilometers, twisting the battlefield into something that no Concorde navigation system had ever been designed to understand. Entire attack formations drifted off course as straight lines became impossible to follow. Massive dreadnoughts that had sailed together for decades suddenly found themselves separated by expanding pockets of distorted space. Missiles curved harmlessly into empty darkness. Precision targeting dissolved into chaos as reality itself refused to obey familiar physics. Then humanity struck. Not with rage. With precision. Hidden defense platforms ignited simultaneously across the solar system. Thousands of autonomous interceptor craft erupted from concealed launch silos buried within asteroids, lunar caverns, and orbital stations, accelerating with impossible agility. They moved less like machines and more like a single living organism, guided by an intelligence that processed millions of battlefield decisions every second. Swarms divided, merged, and reformed before enemy sensors could even register their positions. Every maneuver appeared unpredictable, yet every movement served a larger design invisible to the invaders. Inside Earth's underground command centers, engineers monitored oceans of data flowing across holographic displays. They weren't firing weapons. They were rewriting the battlefield. Quantum intrusion systems slipped silently through Concord communication networks, altering targeting algorithms by fractions so small they escaped immediate detection. Friendly identification protocols reversed without warning. Navigation maps shifted by microscopic degrees until entire fleets unknowingly aimed at empty space. Supply drones rerouted themselves. Automated defense turrets hesitated for a single fatal second before recognizing allies as unknown contacts. Humanity wasn't simply fighting ships. It was fighting certainty itself. Fleet Marshal Kaler watched in disbelief as one of his forward squadrons fired a coordinated barrage that missed every human vessel by kilometers despite flawless firing solutions. Reports flooded the bridge. Navigation desynchronization spreading. Formation Delta has lost tactical synchronization. Weapon guidance failure across multiple carriers. The impossible was happening. Not because Concord technology had failed. Because someone else understood it better. Beyond Mars, one of humanity's newly revealed shipyards reached full production capacity. Gigantic automated assembly lines moved with breathtaking speed, welding armor, installing reactors, and launching fresh warships in minutes instead of months. Every time a human vessel was destroyed, raw materials harvested from nearby asteroids streamed into orbital factories. Before the wreckage had finished tumbling through space, 3 new ships emerged to replace it. The galaxy had spent centuries measuring military strength by fleet size. Humanity measured it by production. Admiral Evelyn Ward watched the battle unfold from the UNS horizon, her expression calm despite the chaos surrounding her. She had no desire to conquer the galaxy. That had never been the objective. This battle was about something far older than victory. It was about choice. She opened a secure transmission that instantly appeared on every Concord flagship. The battlefield grew strangely quiet as commanders listened. "You believed," Evelyn said, her voice steady across the stars, "that Exile would leave humanity alone, helpless, dependent." Behind her, countless human ships emerged from hyperspace, not advancing to destroy the retreating fleet, but positioning themselves between Earth and the invaders like an unbreakable shield. "You spent generations deciding what humanity was allowed to build." A brief pause. "You never stopped to ask what humanity had already become." No threats followed. No demands. Only truth. One by one, Concord warships powered down their primary weapons. Across the tactical display, hostile indicators faded into neutral signals as commanders finally understood the reality before them. This had never been a battle they could win. Not because humanity possessed stronger weapons. But because humanity had prepared for the future while the galaxy had prepared only for the past. The war ended not with the roar of collapsing fleets, but with silence. One by one, the vast armadas of the Galactic Concord withdrew from the solar system, their engines fading into distant points of light until only the stars remained. Across hundreds of worlds, the realization settled like a long winter. The civilization they had dismissed as reckless newcomers had not begged for mercy, nor reached for conquest when victory stood within their grasp. Instead, humanity had simply held the line, and refused to let anyone else decide its destiny. Within a single standard year, the Galactic Concord fractured under the weight of its own arrogance. Ancient alliances dissolved. Trade blocks collapsed. Member worlds that had blindly supported Earth's exile demanded investigations into the vote that had nearly ignited a galactic catastrophe. Some governments issued formal apologies. Others dismantled their fleets, fearful that another act of pride might awaken humanity once again. A few chose isolation, disappearing beyond the edges of known space, unwilling to face the consequences of what they had witnessed. Earth, however, did nothing the galaxy expected. No invasion fleets crossed neighboring borders. No victory parades marched beneath alien skies. No demands for tribute echoed through defeated capitals. Instead, humanity closed the jump gates surrounding the solar system, not as prison walls, but as sovereign borders. Massive orbital stations blossomed around Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies, linked by shimmering corridors of quantum transit built entirely on human terms. Shipyards that had once forged warships now assembled exploration vessels with graceful silver hulls, their mission no longer conquest or defense alone, but discovery. Universities welcomed new generations of scientists, historians, and engineers determined to build a civilization defined not by fear of its enemies, but by confidence in itself. Across Earth, children looked up at the stars knowing they belonged to no empire except their own future. Admiral Evelyn Ward stood once more aboard the observation deck of the UNS Horizon, now permanently anchored above Earth's orbit as both guardian and monument. The scars of battle still marked sections of its armor, left intentionally unrepaired as quiet reminders rather than trophies. Through the great observation window, she watched fleets of civilian transports drift peacefully between orbital habitats while construction drones traced bright arcs around newly completed research stations. The same stars that had once carried threats now reflected endless possibilities. She remembered the day the exile vote had passed, the certainty in the voices of those who believed humanity could be controlled simply by cutting it off from the galaxy. Strange, she thought, how often civilizations confuse dependence with cooperation. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. A young cadet entered the observation deck, carrying a freshly archived copy of galactic history. His uniform was spotless, his expression filled with the curiosity of someone born after the war. He hesitated before speaking. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Go ahead." He looked toward Earth before opening the archive. "They call it the Great Exile." He paused. "But, if humanity won, why didn't we take control of the galaxy?" For a long moment, Evelyn simply watched sunlight rise over the curve of the planet below. Oceans shimmered like liquid sapphire. White clouds drifted peacefully above continents where billions of ordinary lives continued without ever hearing a weapon fire again. Finally, she answered. "Because the purpose of strength isn't to rule." Her voice was quiet. "It's to make sure no one else can." The cadet stood silently beside her as dawn slowly illuminated the UNS Horizon, turning its battle-scarred hull into polished gold. Somewhere beyond the solar system, distant civilizations continued rebuilding, forever changed by the lesson humanity had taught them. History would remember fleets, battles, treaties, and political collapse. But those who studied the truth understood that none of those things had defined the turning point. It had been a decision. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth because it believed humanity needed permission to stand among the stars. Humanity had answered by proving that freedom was never something another civilization could grant, or take away. And centuries later, every child who looked toward the night sky learned the same enduring lesson. The universe had approved humanity's exile. Humanity had approved its own future. And from that day forward, the stars no longer judged Earth. They followed its example.